Get your knife and fork ready to dig into a plate full of profits on the DFY Restaurant Revolution podcast with your host, recovering restaurant owner, Michael Tebow.
Welcome to the DFY Restaurant Revolution podcast, and I am very excited today. Thank you for stopping by. I have an opportunity today to spend some time and interview one of my mentors, one of my idols. This gentleman has an unbelievable pedigree in business. He's done so much. He's been a author, a speaker, a $1 billion success coach for restaurants. And he and I have been coaching restaurants now for past 15 years together, thousands of restaurants. He's an acclaimed artist. He's a brilliant marketer. He's pretty much done it all. And he's a doctor. Just this past year, received his doctorate degree. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you one of my closest friends, confidants, business associates, Dr. Timothy S. Paulson. Doctor, are you with us in the house?
Thank you very much. Boy, I love that introduction, Michael. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you, whether we're at a live event somewhere, which we've done for 15 plus years, out to dinner, which we've done scores of times, talking like this. I always learn something because you have great questions. You also have great answers. And so I look forward to this conversation, Michael. Thank you. And if I call you Tebow throughout this conversation, it's because I love that name, Tebow. I mean, it doesn't get cooler than that.
I'm used to it, so don't worry. You can call me whatever makes you feel comfortable. And Dr. Timothy used to be Tim, but it doesn't seem appropriate with the doctor in front either. So I think Timothy is so much more. It's biblical, but it also works better with the doctor. So I'm glad that you transitioned over. I do have to ask you one thing, and I looked for it in the book and I can't remember. I don't think we've known each other for 20 plus years. What's the S stand for?
Um, I would like to think it means humble. I was going to say superstar, but humble. No, it's Scott. Scott.
See,
Timothy
I
Scott.
don't know if you ever told me that or not.
No, there's not much significance to it. I
Well,
love names, Tebow. I love names. And I love asking people their middle name because often the middle name has significance. It was my dad's best friend in the army or my mom's father's, all this. Scott, no significance.
I thought because the S period looks good. So I thought that was something you bestowed upon yourself. But
It does differentiate me from other Timothy Paulsons who are artists, or authors. Yes.
it's a there's this interview could take days because he's done so much and there's so much knowledge there and that we can learn. But one of the biggest accolades is the clarity, the coaching, the mentorship, the help that he brings to restaurant owners, which 90% of the people listening today are restaurant owners. And Dr. Timothy's been working with them for years and years and years with myself and also Rory Fat. We're kind of the three musketeers, three stooges, depends on three blind mice, depends on how you look at it, the situation. But Dr. Timothy has just been endeared by so many restaurant owners because of his insight and his help and his motivation, his ability to, examine businesses and situations. And I've had more fun, doing this these past 15 years, and a lot of it has to do because I've had the opportunity to work with Dr. Timothy. So this is a special interview for me, and I know you're gonna get a bunch out of it. Now, the reason why I asked Dr. Timothy to interview, not that having you on just because is extremely helpful. But he came out with a brand new book. This is book number 3, Your Simple Guide to Doing the Impossible. And it's interesting the progression, which I'll ask him. The size of the books. We started out with Love and Grow Rich, very large book, lots of pages. I got mine back there, or it's the doorstop.
I have mine right here. This I wrote in 2008 when I was young and moderately handsome. But you're right, it's 320 pages. So
It doesn't read like that though. It's not. It doesn't read like a long book. It's great. The stories and that particular book will teach you so much more about life and how to be happy. It's not just a success, motivational book. The lessons I learned from reading that, especially if you have kids, there was quite a few life lessons in there. Great book. And then he came out with Totality X, which is a little bit smaller, right? Why don't you
this
tell us about that book?
this came out 2001 when I was younger and much less moderately handsome. 200 227 pages. It's a really good book. But Totality X, and the subtitle is The Art of Becoming All God Created You to Be. This is more faith centric. It talks about becoming all you're capable of becoming as everything in your life, whether you're a mother, father, employee, whatever it might be. How do you become all you're capable of becoming? And this is where I merge art and theology. So it features about 20 of my paintings. I show a painting, I tell a little bit of the history of the painting, and then why I painted and what it represents, and then the success message that is inherent in each of the paintings. So, but a couple of hundred pages, a little bit easier to get through, perhaps.
There's lots of pictures.
Yeah,
There's lots of pictures.
And then this one, 102 pages. Look at that. I think that Leonardo da Vinci said, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication," and I tried to keep it very simple. And I enjoy reading this as well. Not only Thibaut is at 102 pages, it has over 50 pictures, so it's easier to get through, and I think it provides some value.
It provides a lot of value. I read it, and it took me a couple hours to go through, but that's because we'll get into it, stop at each chapter and, answer the questions right out of plan. But there is a very studly picture of you
Yes,
on the back
yes.
cover on your scooter, your Vespa redone, which there's an awesome story about the vintage scooter in the book as well. So
Yeah.
you might have a few more days on you than the previous two books, but you're looking good, my friend, on the back there
Oh,
in your
thank
black
you.
t-shirt showing off the guns. So
So, so the subtitle of this book: How a $1 million painting, a vintage scooter, a ghost town, and guacamole can help you get your impossible cool thing fast. So I bring in guacamole, which is from a restaurant, and a ghost town, and $1 million painting to help illustrate the 7 principles in that book. So,
which we'll get to in a second too, the 7 cool tea principles. But I wanted to ask you, no matter if you're in the restaurant business, the hardware business, the carpet cleaning business, uh, everybody at one point in their life that's a business owner has aspirations of writing a book.
yeah.
And you've done 3 now, 3 wonderfully, successful books, and you were on the top list for what, and on Amazon for this book.
Number one top release, Thibaut. Number one top new release.
What was the category?
The category was ghosts and hauntings. And when I saw that, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm number one new release. Ghosts and hauntings. Wow. And I didn't realize it right away, Thibaut. But a few days later, I realized, well, in the subtitle, it says a ghost town. It mentions a ghost town. So that's where the ghost came in. But it was number one. We're number one, baby.
That's right. So when marketing your book, and number one new release on Amazon,
Yep.
very small print, 5, 6 font in ghosts and mysteries. So I don't think you need to include any more than that. You're good
Oh,
to go on this.
it was,
Um,
when you talk about marketing and opportunities, restaurant owners, I love restaurant owners. I've, like you say, dealt with them for over 20 years now, literally over 20 years with Rory, and then with you. I met you right at the beginning. But restaurant owners, man, on the front lines of commerce, of entrepreneurship, and I just so admire and respect restaurant owners because that's tough. It's a tough business. And but we're around really successful restaurant owners because they do some really cool things, and a lot of that, is written about in the book. But anyway,
so what motivates you? What's the driving force, that just spoke to you? I need to write this book. What's the motivation? Why were you compelled to write this?
So, first of all, an author benefits much more than anyone else because she or he has to work at it for months, right? I mean, there's just so much thinking and planning and writing. First of all, I had to live the experience for over 60 years and then take the experience and write it. And but by putting it in on paper, writing a book, I learned a tremendous amount. I have told you before, I use this book because at the end of each chapter, as we'll talk about, the end of each chapter, there's questions to answer. I wrote the book, I wrote the questions, but they stimulate so many new ideas when I go through it and apply this myself. So I'm the best student of my own work, which I really like. So for one, Thibault, I knew that it would help me personally to write the book. But really, it goes back when you talk about impossible. I started writing this book indirectly when I was 11 years old. I don't remember
Hmm.
the sporting event, but I remember watching a sporting event as a little kid. And I thought, wow, that comeback, that was impossible. That was like a miracle. And then I said, I'm going to write a book. And I don't know where that came from. I was raised in a very creative environment with my dad being a full-time professional artist. So just creativity was all around me. So I said, I'm going to write a book. So I remember getting the paper out. I remember writing about this experience. Again, I wish I remembered what it was, but writing about this experience. And I said, all right, chapter 1 is done. And then it was like I had nothing after that. It was like I didn't. So it was like, oh, writing a book is a little bit more challenging than it looks like. But I grew up in Southern California, in Santa Barbara, California, and and Disneyland wasn't that far away. We would go to Disneyland, at least once a year as I was growing up. And Thibault, I was mesmerized by Disney. I couldn't sleep before we went. I couldn't sleep for days after. Just the experience was so impossible. It was so cool. And later I came across the quote by Disney. It's kind of fun to do the impossible. And it's like, okay, so all of that, I've seen all this impossible stuff. I've had it in my heart for many, many years, but it's like, it's like years later, only about 3 years ago, a friend of mine whom I had helped in his business for over 20 years, Joe Polish, he bought a ghost town called Cleator, Arizona. So I'm having lunch with Joe, 2001, and he says, "You know what? I'm buying a ghost town." He showed me pictures of Cleator, and it's nothing exciting in the pictures. It's like got a few buildings, and there's 8 residents, and they've got this bar and yacht club in the middle of the desert. I'm thinking, buying a ghost town, who does that? That is so cool. So shortly thereafter, Joe and his partners closed on the ghost town. I jumped in my truck and I drove down there from Utah to Cleator. And it was like when I came into the town, it was like I was going back in time. I don't know why. but it just completely captured my imagination. It mesmerized me. Buying a ghost town isn't impossible, it's more improbable, but it's a really cool thing. And so that's the stimulus for writing the book. I say your simple guide to doing the impossible, and I define impossible as something crazy, something that is highly improbable, something that others might say is impossible. I say that's your cool thing. What's in your heart? What is like that cool thing that you want to do? Go to the moon, get a PhD, start a new business, 10 times your business, ride a scooter across the country, whatever it might be. What's your cool thing? So it was actually, I wrote a chapter about Joe Polish buying this ghost town.
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3. And what does it say there? The cool thing of buying a ghost town.
Arizona ghost town. Yep.
It's like that caught me. So I wrote, even though it's chapter 3, that's what I wrote first. When I was 11 years ago, I wrote something, but the next something about doing the impossible was that chapter about Joe Polish. And then I started to say, wait a second. Like I just wrote I didn't know what I was going to, it wasn't even a chapter. I just wrote this report, you might say, about Joe Polish. I just started writing. This is so cool. And I said, man, what else have I seen? And it's like, well, my dad started out as a professional baseball player. He played in the minor leagues well before I was born. At the age of 18, he signed his first contract. Well, he was a total sports fanatic, a jock, and he became a well-known professional full-time artist, a painter. Took one class in school, in junior high school, not one art class. He got a D grade. He was the farthest thing from being an artist that you could imagine. But how did he go from being a full-time professional artist and then doing something, getting an education, and then becoming a full-time professional artist? That was impossible. I mean, people thought there's no way this guy could ever be a full-time artist. Now, he's been on PBS television since 1988 teaching. So the viewers of this, you're going through the stations with your remote. You see somebody painting, you stop for a few minutes on a PBS station and you admire it. Wow, that's really cool. It's amazing. That's my dad. Now, I know, Thibault, most people are thinking, wow, Bob Ross is Timothy's dad.
Depends what part of the country you're from.
Depends on what part of the country. My dad is Buck Paulson, painting with Paulson on since 1988. So that was impossible. And then as a young early 20s, I met Cy Sperling, who had this company called Hair Club for Men. I was in California. He was in New York. I flew to New York to interview to open his Chicago office. And so in my early 20s, here he is telling me we're going to have over 100 offices. Over 50 offices. We're going to do over $100 million a year. Now, at the time, his company was doing about 10 million, doing pretty well. That's good. So I'm thinking he wants to do over $100 million a year. This guy, Cy Sperling, he was a street fighter in the Bronx. He was the least likely person to become a huge success in business. That's what he told me over and over again. People thought I was crazy, like this was impossible. Well, I joined him, and over the time I was with Cy, we took that company to $120 million a year, 69 offices.
Amazing.
Oh, gosh, that was impossible. And then some of the things in my heart were impossible. So it's like, wow, I wrote chapter number 1 about my dad, chapter number 2 about Cy Sperling. Now, he's the guy, the famous, I'm not only the hair club president, I'm also a client. People who lived in the 80s and 90s, they knew Cy Sperling because his commercials were ubiquitous. I mean, everybody knew that tagline. But anyway, that was chapter 2, and Joe Polish buying and transforming Cleator from a sleepy little ghost town into a really cool destination place. Now that was impossible. And then chapter 4 about me and the things that are in my heart and the impossible things that I'm working towards. Starting a new art movement and selling a $7 yard sale painting for $1 million. That's impossible. Then chapter 5, introducing the 7 cool T principles. That stands for 7 cool thing principles, 7 principles. And then in that chapter, I introduced a case study, a restaurant owner, ironically, who applied the 7 principles. So anyway, that's why I wrote the book. Started with the ghost town, and then it's like, wow, I know all this other stuff, and I can share this and help people to do their next cool thing. Because all of us, Thibaut, everybody, I mean, opening a restaurant, having a successful restaurant, Thibaut, for a lot of people, that was impossible. People probably looked at you like you're crazy doing that. You've already done the impossible. What this book and my 7 cool T principles help to do the next one much faster.
And part of it is what you alluded to was getting started.
Yeah.
It's just, and it's like you said, you wrote your first chapter, back when you were a young boy for the book. And then it doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
Perfect is the enemy of implementation, right? I mean, that's the way I look at it. And I know there's a famous quote, but it's if you want everything to be perfect, you'll never get to the point where you're starting and implementing, and that's what you need to do. I remember back when I started, you were actually at that conference speaking, and I remember talking to you before. It was Dan Kennedy Summit. We're t- we're talking probably 24, 25 years ago, back when Dan was doing the big summits.
Yeah.
And you were I can't you were finishing up your product hours before you were going on stage.
Yep.
What you were gonna,
Right.
what you were doing, and what you were gonna sell. I remember that. And after that first day, I was so inspired by all the different info marketers and coaches and people that were attending the seminar and then listening to Dan all day and talking to you. I went upstairs and I just I did not stop. I didn't sleep that night. I was so excited. And like you said, that burning desire, which you
Yeah.
always talk about, just moved me into motion. And I wrote I filled up 2, 3 notebooks. I remember going downstairs in the middle of the night asking them for another notebook, notepad, on my $1 million catering system for restaurant owners and how to develop a catering company. Now it's all online and all on video on my website, and everything's downloadable. But that was the catalyst. That was the starting point. This book is a guide that'll help you get there quicker, but it's a catalyst to start, to reach your goals, your impossible dreams. I'll have to, Timothy and I did a few podcasts back in the day before I got, busy and swamped with other things. But there's one where we talk about the BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal. And I'll put that back up if you're a member, a DFY member on the membership site, because that's one of my favorite podcasts. And I got a lot of feedback from the members on that. And it's exactly what you're talking about. You know, identifying what, and you got to be a little scared, which I'm jumping around a little bit. And you talk about this. I absolutely, you are just so brilliant when it comes to developing, success principles and how to implement them and helping people. That's like, such a God-given talent, that you have, and that vision and clarity. And that's why people are attracted to you. And I've
Thank
seen it.
you.
I've been a witness, ringside for the past 20 years. And it's been a pleasure. And I've learned so much from you. But you
Thank you.
have in the book, and obviously if you don't have the book, get the book. And Dr. Timothy will tell you how to get it, in a little bit in the interview. But you have the scare some people principle,
Yeah.
which to me just resonated and hit home, because if somebody tells you no, or that's too big, you can't do it, you're on the right track.
Yep.
So give me a little bit of background and what you mean by that scare some people principle.
I didn't quite name it or recognize it until I was finishing my doctorate. So I finished my doctorate last year at Emory University. Emory is in Atlanta, Georgia. And I had a dissertation, a project that I needed to do to finish before graduating. And I wrote this dissertation, I put together this project, and it revolved around, well, I'll tell you that in just a second. Anyway, I submitted it to Dr. Solon. He was the advisor during the last year of my doctorate. And he would, when he first read it, kind of responded. He said, wow, this is, there's a lot to this. There's a lot to this. It's like, this is really, really big, right? And then it came down to, I finished the dissertation. Then I needed to do a final presentation. Some would say a defense of the dissertation type of thing. So I presented it, and it's to my colleagues, all in my cohort, 25 people and professors and advisors, so that the crowd is there. And Dr. Solon is there too. So I presented my final presentation, and then he got up first to comment. He said, Timothy, in my time as an advisor, he says, I've been doing this for years, teaching at Emory University. He says, I've never seen a final project dissertation that is nearly as ambitious as yours. He said, it scared me. And that went right to my heart. It was like, wow, I like that. I like the fact that it scared him. And what he was talking about, it was so ambitious, it was so big that it scared him. Like, oh my gosh, I don't know if Timothy should be going after this type of thing because it's just so big. And it was like, man, I am so happy that I scared my advisor. And it's about high ambition. But just to kind of bring some closure to this first part, my presentation was on how a small art studio in Utah, so I live in Utah, I'm an artist, how a small art studio in Utah can help lead out in abandoning attitudes and actions of prejudice by creating a new art movement. You don't just one day say, I'm going to start a new art movement. It doesn't happen that way. But anyway, that starts with selling a $7 yard sale painting for $1 million. So all of that was kind of packed together, but that's what my dissertation, my project is about. I want to create a new art movement for social impact, and specifically in this case, to help root out prejudice. I bought a $7 yard sale painting years ago. It was a boring, dusty landscape. I bought it. I took it to my art studio. I transformed it using abstract expressionism, a drip style, Jackson Pollock type of a style. And then I put a $1 million price tag on that because of what it represents. I call it rise from the dust. So it rose from the dust. Now, you think about doing the impossible. Oftentimes it's like we rise from the dust, nothing. Cy Sperling started a business from scratch and sold his company, Cy Sperling did years later, for tens of millions of dollars. Take this painting from the dust of a yard sale, transform it, put a $1 million price tag on that. That's kind of representative of people becoming all that they're capable of becoming, right? It represents doing the impossible. It represents helping to lead out and abandoning attitudes and actions of prejudice. Now, the painting has not sold yet for $1 million. I'm very confident it will someday. But all of that ties in with, it's kind of foundational for some of the principles to help you to do the impossible. So it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary, Thibaut, to present my dissertation to Dr. Solon, because how is he going to respond? It's kind of scary initially to announce to the world, I'm working to develop a new art movement to make social impact. It's kind of scary telling the world this painting is $1 million, but it all fits in with impossible. It's like my cool thing definition. That's how we change the world. It's like the president of the United States said in his inauguration just recently, in America, impossible is what we do. And you think
Mhm.
about some of the things that Donald Trump has done and wants to do, it's like the impossible. That scares people. Wow, he wants to buy Iceland. He wants to rename the Gulf of America. He wants to go to Mars, all of these things. Well, that's impossible. It's kind of fun to do the impossible, as Disney said. So all of that, by the way, Walt Disney, the way that I remember it, Thibault, and I know your daughter worked for Disney and we've spoken a lot about this. When Disney wanted to start a park, Disneyland, it's like some of his relatives thought he was crazy, like it scared them. He's going to go bankrupt again, right? And it's like you're going to do create this park based on a mouse. They wanted him locked up for insanity because it scared people. It's kind of fun to do the impossible. In America, the impossible is what we do. You think of Elon Musk, all these impossibilities that he's doing scares people. That's why this principle is so powerful.
All right, I have a great question for you then, because people that are listening to us now might, and we'll break it down to a very simple thing. For a restaurant owner, well, I can't do that. There's, just I won't have any support. I don't have the money. I can't raise my prices. I'll lose all my customers.
Yeah.
They're filled with the fear in the I can'ts. I call it the I can'ts. And
Yeah.
if you're starting a sentence with I can't do that, I mean, you're imposing these self-limitations. How do a business owner, or anyone really get past that fear where, how did you, how much is that painting? It's $1 million. That's
Yeah.
scary
Yeah.
because you're afraid that people are going to judge you and look at you like, what right does he have to charge $1 million for that painting that he bought for $7? At a
Yeah.
garage sale. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. How would you suggest, other than buying the book, get past that mental block?
Well, it's a good question. The scare somebody principle includes scaring yourself. I mean, it's like if it's not scary to you, you're probably not thinking big
Hmm.
enough, or you're not pushing the envelope enough. So that's it. It's like it's doing the impossible includes doing stuff that scares the heck out of you, but you do it anyway. And because that's what you want. You mentioned earlier burning desire. Burning desire has a really important role in all of this. It's foundational in the whole thing, right? But you and I have both heard it many, many, many times. I can never raise my prices. I'll lose all of my guests. It's impossible to do that. It's impossible to push the envelope, right? So Cy Sperling was really scared. He was really scared about investing all this money and advancing and creating this really big business. There are a lot of I can'ts, I can'ts, I can'ts. But one of the things that Cy did, and I think that a really good first step, it happens to be the first principle here, is go to the master. Go to the master. Who has already done this? Who can give you really good advice? My dad was a professional baseball player. Then he got this desire out of nowhere. Shortly after moving to Santa Barbara, after marrying my mom and having a couple of kids, moved to Santa Barbara. He was told by a local artist, if you want to learn to paint, go to the master. His name is Claude Buck. And I don't know if he's accepting students, but Claude Buck, 72 years old, once recognized as one of the 100 greatest living painters in the United States. I mean, Claude Buck was a master. Go to the master. So my dad drove right over to Claude Buck's house, knocked on the door, met Claude Buck. And my dad talked to Claude, hey, I want to be an artist. I've never painted before. I've never done any art, but I really want to do this. And Claude Buck said something that totally changed my dad's life forever. 15 words. Let's see if we can make a great artist out of you in 1 year. Now that removed a lot of the fear, Thibault. Like when my dad went home to my mom one day before that, and he said, I want to be an artist. It's like that scared my mom.
Yeah.
And probably my dad, because he had three young kids at the time, 2 years and younger at the time. And it was like, I was just a baby. I want to be an artist. Just out of nowhere, this desire came,
That's
right?
scary stuff.
Scared
That's
him.
real life scary stuff.
I believe, Thibault, it scared my dad to say it too. It's like, it's
Oh,
scary. It's like, well, here's why I can't. I've taken one art class in my life and I got a D
and I
grade.
get D in it. Yeah.
I'm an athlete. I don't know how to match my clothes, let alone paint. My dad went out, he got an art kit and at the local art supply place, and he went to the kitchen table and he painted a tree on a paper towel. He still has it, and it's in the book, by the way. A picture of it's in the book. But he painted this tree, and years later, my older sister was probably 10 or 11 at the time. She said, "Daddy, how old were you when you painted that tree?" And he said, "How old do you think I was?" And she said, 3. It looked like a little 3-year-old painted this tree. So that was scary. Here's why I can't be an artist, because I have no idea. I don't have any skill. I took one class. I'm an athlete. I was recreation department supervisor. All these reasons why you can't. If you want to learn to paint, go to the master, Claude Buck. Claude Buck cut my dad's learning curve. Thibault, it gave my dad so much confidence when under the hand of a master, he was able to learn, he was encouraged. So where can a restaurant owner go, or someone who wants to get into the restaurant? If I wanted to get into catering, I'm not just going to try to figure this out. I'm going to the master. Who's the master? Michael Thibault. He's done it. He's created a program on how to do it. If I want to become more successful, who do I go to? Well, Thibault has this podcast done for you, market, all of this. Let me go to the master. That cuts out the I can't, because Thibault is telling me I can. Rory Fat, the master, all of these restaurant owners have gone to Rory Fat over the years. And Rory brought me in because I know some things about business and success and marketing. It's like, go to the master. That's how you cut out the can'ts. It's impossible. That's the first principle for some, Thibault. It's like there's 7 principles, the 7 cool T principles. The first one, a lot of people can do the impossible by just finding the master, and then she or he can then guide you. A master can be an author, a book. Here's some really good ideas, right? It can be a coach. It can be a speaker. It can be a pastor. It could be a parent. It could be whatever. The master. Go to someone who's done it already, who knows how to do it. Cut your learning curve dramatically. You go from I can't to I can. I know I can. Let's see if we can make a great artist out of you in a year. Oh my gosh, life changing. You find someone who can say the equivalent of something like that, changes everything.
That those 2 principles that you talked about, burning desire and finding a master. If you've got those, you're on your way. You got a really, really good shot of, creating that impossibility that you've been thinking about. And everything that Dr. Timothy is discussing and talking about is in his book. The first 2 chapters about his dad and Cy Sperling. I've known you for 20 plus years. There's things in there that I didn't know especially about Cy Sperling. I didn't know your dad also roomed with Roger Maris. How cool is that?
Yeah.
I know we're dating ourselves, so you can Google Roger Maris and look it up, but broke Babe Ruth's, record, unbelievable baseball player. And the thing,
He also played against Hank Aaron's team.
Hank, yeah,
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 the
and that's in the book.
Oakland Bears. Yeah.
It's just and all that stuff about Cy Sperling and the commercials,
Yep.
and the tagline,
Yep.
just invaluable business and life lessons. Very, very cool stuff, my
Can I
friend.
just add one thing, Thibault, because we're talking about going to the master.
Sure.
Scott Sperling, after being in years in business, so he had maybe a couple of offices in New York. He was doing well. Then he said, I want to go on television. I want to do a television commercial, Hair Club for Men television commercial. This was like 1983, 84, something like that. And he went to Burton Miller. So Burton Miller was the one who, you say he went to the master. Burton knew how to put together commercials and all this. And they did this really slick commercial, a hair club client, nice looking guy riding a horse with a big full head of hair, showed his before picture. Wow, that guy used to be bald. And then the same guy playing tennis. I remember the commercial. I saw the commercial before I met Cy Sperling in the early 80s. And running. So this handsome guy running. So they did this commercial. So that was their first television commercial. But as they were finishing doing that commercial, Burton Miller said to Cy, hey, Cy, I think that commercial is going to be successful, but I've got an idea for another commercial, kind of a backup. Let's do this backup commercial just in case the other one doesn't do as well as we expect. And he said to Cy, I think it would be really cool if you went on and you were the spokesperson for this commercial. Now, Cy was not gifted. He was not gifted before the camera. He looked stiff. He had a very heavy New York accent, kind of talked it kind of out of the corner of his mouth a little bit of a lisp, And it's like, Cy, let's put you on the commercial. Then at the end, say, I'm not only the hair club president, hold up a picture of yourself bald. I'm not only the hair club president, but I'm also a client. So here's Cy talking the whole 60-second commercial with his beautiful head of hair. And then at the end, shock some people, surprise some people. I'm not only the hair club president, I'm also a client. And Cy did not want to do the commercial. He did not. He said, no, I don't want to do that. That's hokey and that would fail. And I'm not a good spokesperson and I don't think it's a good idea. Kind of persisted. And Cy said, all right, let's do it. Hopefully we don't ever have to show it because the first commercial will be so successful. So they did this commercial. And then the first commercial they ever did, television commercial, didn't do well. I heard Cy say it flopped. I don't know how bad it was, but it wasn't good. And they said, okay, Cy, we've got this other commercial. Let's do that one. And even then, Cy was just so reluctant. I just don't know. I don't think we should do it. All right. And I think Cy was probably he was scared. He was scared like it's going to bomb or people are going to laugh at him because he's not a good spokesperson. He was scared. So do that which is scary, right? So
right.
And Thibault, the phone rang off the hook with prospects interested in when that commercial started. It was a huge success. Cy was like the guy next door. He wasn't a slick salesperson, none of this stuff, right? And so then, and they kept running that commercial, and every commercial thereafter had somewhere in the commercial, I'm not only the hair club president, but I'm also a client. And that line was on Letterman, it was on Jay Leno, it was in movies, it was everywhere. And the commercials were so successful that the commercials were running all the time, all over the country. And we went from $10 million a year to $120 million a year.
Wow.
In large part, now there's a lot of other things we did, but in large part because Cy went to the master who knew how to do commercials. And that master gave him the tagline that became epic. It became historic. Even now, you say, I'm not only a hair club president, I'm also a client. People remember that if they were around at that time. So scare some people.
I remember.
Cy Sperling scared some people, himself mostly, by doing the commercial, but he went to the master.
Well, that's your next book, how to come up with $100 million tagline for your business. After I read that story in the book, I did not know all the details, and thank you for sharing that in your book. It was awesome. It was that whole story, and everybody that grew up in the 70s and 80s knows about those commercials and that tagline. So how one, tagline can change your business, with the association, extremely powerful. I would be amiss if we didn't get to one of my favorite chapters in the book. It was a bonus section on a case study from one of our dear friends who owns a restaurant, extremely successful, has
Yep.
been through and is just gone through some serious challenges, in his business, and has come out on the other side stronger, more
Yep.
profitable, more beloved by his community, more his staff is he has staff members that have been with him for 30 plus years. I think I was talking to him the other day, and his average staff member term is 12 to 15 years. It's just
Crazy.
incredible.
Yep.
And he's a restaurant owner in La Cañada, California, which obviously, LA, right by LA. And he lives very close to that and had, to evacuate. And his restaurant was without power for a couple days and had to shut down. And he's helping his staff. I believe there's 10 of them that were affected by the fires in California. Five of them have lost their homes, and five are uncertain, the condition of their homes. Hopefully they know now and everything's all right. But he's created a whole campaign and GoFundMe to help. Just an unbelievable, business person and restaurant owner. Can you give us just a synopsis about what you write about in the book? His name is Ben Hansen. If you could just give us a little background and why you chose, to write about Ben in the book.
Yeah, I love Bent, and so do you. He's just a great person who cares more about others than he does himself. So um, 10 of his employees displaced, like you said. He did a GoFundMe. He's not getting a dime of that. I mean, he was affected too. He had to close his rest. Over $50,000 he raised for them. Just a remarkable person. But Thibaut, when I was coming to the conclusion or finishing my book, concluding my book, writing my book, I didn't have that chapter. And so it was my dad and Cy Sperling and Joe Polish and myself and all this. And I thought, wait a second. I know someone who has implemented all of the 7 cool T principles without even knowing what they were. And oh my gosh, this is a beautiful example of it. So I've been to Los Gringos Locos restaurant in La Cañada several times. So have you, Thibaut. We've been there together at least a couple of times. And it's a great restaurant. The food is fabulous. I love the flautas. They're my favorite. They come with a guarantee. Ben, it's called, if you don't, money back guarantee, 100%. I've never seen that before. These are so good. Flautas cooked Bent style, 100% guarantee. That's a clue to restaurant owners. Wow, Bent's different. And one of the principles in the book is be different. And that principle is based on Sally Hogshead. She's a Hall of Fame speaker. I heard her say years ago, it's better to be different than it is to be better. Which, by the way, if we were looking for one principle for Cy Sperling, in addition to go to the master, it's better to be different. He was different in so many different ways, not necessarily better at first, but different. But Bent, he's different. Oh my gosh. He does the unexpected. He reinvents things. But Bent, when you look at the book and you read the 7 cool T principles and you see how Bent has implemented each one of them, it's like, wow, I can see how the impossible can happen. So let me just try to be brief here. But what I wrote about was Bent, what he did during COVID, which is going to be very much the same thing that he's going to do in recovering from the fires. But during COVID, California, they came down hard on restaurant owners and business owners in general, didn't they? I mean,
it's tough state.
Yeah, tough state, man. You can't have indoor dining. It's got to be all drive-through or takeout. Well, Bent doesn't have drive-through, and he wasn't built on takeout. So it's like, what is Bent going to do? What's he going to do during COVID? I mean, all these restaurants are closing, and a lot of them decided to do that. There was PPP money and there was this and that, and let just everybody go on unemployment. Yeah, let's just close the doors. Bent knew what was best for his employees. He thought about his employees. What's going to be best for them? We're going to stay open. We're going to do the impossible. We're going to do the crazy. People looked at Bent and said, Bent, you're crazy to stay open. You're not built for this. No, you let everybody go. And Bent, he scared people. He did the unexpected. And he went to the master and all of this. But let me just focus on a couple of examples because this is so instructive for restaurant owners particularly. First of all, he did the unexpected by even staying open. No indoor dining, only drive-through or delivery. So what Bent did was he got these big tents that were put up in the parking lot. So his restaurant's in kind of a shopping area where there's a lot of parking. And that's why he moved to that place a few years before, right, Thibault? It's like, his previous place was so small, the parking was so bad that he did this. He wouldn't have been able to survive in his previous place. But anyway, actually, he would have figured out a way to do it. But in this way, big tents. So it was outdoor dining. And then between building at 50, 75 yards away from his restaurant, there's these buildings, this walkway. Well, he turned that into an outdoor fresco. So there was dining, outdoor dining. He was following the rules that were coming down, but he said it was like the wild, wild west. The rules were changing, laws, all this type of stuff was changing. He just took action. It's like he could have, here's an example. He could have said, you know what? I need to wait for permission. Can I really put up tents and all this type of stuff? Is that going to satisfy the requirements? He would have waited for weeks to hear back. He looked at what the guidelines were, and he said, I'm going to take action. I'm not going to wait for permission. I'm just going to do it. And so he's in business, days later with tents doing outdoor dining. Another thing, this is one of my favorites examples, but he reinvented stuff. That's one of the principles. Reinvent something on your way to doing the impossible. So after a period of time, they could do indoor dining, but you couldn't have any table side stuff going on. You couldn't have a buffet. That all of that was restricted. Well, Bent's number one menu item, the number one most profitable item on his menu, he told me this and he's spoken about it publicly, so I can share it. It's the table-side guacamole. Now, back in the 90s, Bent invented with a cart rolling to a table. Okay, now it's probably commonplace, but rolling a cart to the table and making guacamole in kind of a theatrical way right next to the table, making tableside guacamole right there. Okay, so he was the first one to do that. That was written about in a magazine. Is it Savoy, a French magazine? But anyway, so he had been doing the number one menu item, number one most profitable item on his menu. Well, when they come back indoors after being in the tents, right? They come back indoors, you can't have tableside guacamole. Well, that takes away my number one most profitable item on the menu. Gee, now most people would say, okay, we have, we'll just make guacamole in the back and bring it out like most restaurants do. Well, you're not going to get as many orders and you can't charge as much because it's not this theatrical table-side experience, right? So here's Ben. He says, you know what? I'm going to reinvent it. So picture this. A cart, same cart, guacamole cart, pulls up to a table, but there's a monitor, a television monitor with a microphone, and you can see the guacamole expert in the back. Bent built a studio in his restaurant in the back. So you could see the guacamole master. That's what they called him, guacamole master, in the back, in the studio. Hey, Michael, how are you tonight? It's nice to see you. Hey, yeah. So you would like some guacamole. So they're communicating with each other because there's microphones. So yes, so they watch on the monitor the guacamole master in the studio or elsewhere making their guacamole, talking to him, engaging all of this. And then he finishes and then they bring it out to the table. They continued with tableside guacamole, totally reinvented. They were able to maintain their number one menu item, and they prospered during COVID times. There were people come, and the thing is, Thibaut, with the fires, they were back in business as soon as the electricity went back on. They were back in business to a full house because Bent has a database. He has emails, he has text or phone numbers. He was able to text out. Bent told me that there was only one other restaurant in town that was open. It was a pizza takeout place. That and Los Gringos Locos, and they had a packed house because he was able to do things. He didn't have to wait for permission. Which again is another one of the 7 Cool Tea principles. So that's why I wrote about Bent. I mean, those are just a couple of small examples. There's other examples as well that are so instructive for restaurant owners, but so instructive for anyone who wants to get their cool thing, to do the impossible. These principles, and that's a way that I describe a principle. It's like truths that are concentrated for wide application. So here's these 7 Cool Tea principles concentrated for wide application, for restaurants, for someone who wants to go to the moon, whatever it is. Here are the 7 Cool Tea principles. And Bent so when I started writing about Bent, it was like, oh my gosh, he everything that he did is the same thing that Cy Sperling did, the same thing my dad did, the same thing that Joe Polish did, same thing that Elon Musk does, same thing that Martin Luther King did, same thing that Walt Disney did. 7 principles that are applicable. Same thing that you've done, Thibaut. If you look at that night that you wrote all night, you had that burning desire. Where had you been? You'd been with the master, Dan.
Master, yep.
Definitely. That's where it all started, right? And it was like you reinvented things. You didn't wait for permission. You did all these types of things so I could have written a chapter about you as well, and it would have been very, very compelling.
And the next one, I'm sure I'll be in there. But yeah, if you wait around for, and everybody that you mentioned use that same principle. If you wait around for someone to adorn you, okay, you are now the $1 million caterer, and people are going to come worship. If you're waiting for somebody to do that, or you are now the best tableside guacamole, in California, in the United States, in the world. If you're waiting for someone else to adorn you, with that title or those accolades, it's not going to come. You have to have that burning desire, and you have to have the motivation to implement. Bent is extremely motivated when someone tells him you can't. Yeah. And if he sees an impossible task, he attacks it and he solves it. I've never seen anything like this with a restaurant. I'm so glad that you put that into your book. It was an awesome chapter and got so much out of it. Again, even I've known Ben for 20 years, and having that information in there and some things that I forgot or I don't know that are applicable to restaurant owners or pretty much anyone.
Can I just one more quick thing about
yeah, go ahead.
So one of the principles of the 7 Cool Tea is do the unexpected. And so what he would do, there's an alley behind the restaurant, and he would from time to time text out, email out to his guests. So he's got this list. That's really important, by the way, having a list. Yeah. And he says, in the alley behind is almost like a secret, in the alley behind the restaurant, a pre-cooked meal in bags. You can drive right up, pay the $40 or whatever it was, and take it with you. Just take it with you. But it wasn't Mexican food. It was a full prime rib dinner. Totally unexpected. Do the unexpected, right? And so it's like almost prohibition style. That's what Bent told me. It's almost like prohibition style. Now, there was nothing wrong with it, right? But out the front door is Mexican. In the restaurant, the Mexican. In the back, hey, we call it In the Alley, and he had this band playing in the corner, so the people drive up, the band's playing, and it's like they pick up their meal and they enjoy the music from it, and then they're gone. Prime rib. So do the unexpected. Don't wait for permission. Reinvent things. We could go on and on and on,
Oh
but
yeah, 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 yeah.
that one
I
just
had
gets.
I had a reminds me I had a Coney Island client in Chicago, but he always wanted to be an upscale gourmet chef, and he wanted to do catering. I was like, great, that's easy. We'll create an upscale, catering division for your restaurant. And he's like, well, we can't do that. Why not? You got a
Yeah.
kitchen, you got the staff, we can order the food. There's nothing stopping you. That's why I love catering because you can be creative. You can fulfill so many different culinary styles if that appeals to you. So
Yep.
yeah, do the impossible, do the can't. Scare
Yep.
yourself, scare your family, scare your friends, scare your staff. I mean, that's what it's all about. That's why we're here. So just one quick thing that I'm going to, because from a reader's standpoint, and it's not just a book that you read, it's a book that you use. That's why I really liked your book, and I think people that read this, especially restaurant owners. But I'm gonna give this to my two daughters. I'm gonna order them each a copy because it's applicable, like I said, for anyone. I think this is a great book if you got kids to give them this book, especially because it's an easy read too.
So what I would like to do is go from being number one new release in Ghosts and Howlings to number one release for teenagers and young people. That would be cool. I like that.
And they need this. They need
Yeah.
this. But one of the biggest takeaways that I got from the book, like I said, it's not just a book, and it's really an outline or a plan, how to develop a plan, and you actually walk through after you can see after each chapter. It gives you a page to break down. Obviously, you can take it and like I did write more on. I'm a old school. I like to write, a legal pad. But one of the examples after chapter one, of speaking about your father, how does Buck Paulson's cool things inspire you to get yours? Then you have all this. So Dr. Timothy is asking you the questions and directing you, to put down the answers in writing. So it's not just a book, it's more like a creation of a plan, an outline for achieving those cool things, those impossible things, those goals in your life. And that's what I took away from it, along with the inspiring stories that, show you the principles, the seven principles that we just discussed. So hats off, Dr. Timothy. It was just, I'm so glad you came out with this. And now's the time because we need this, more than ever. Can
Tipo,
you?
just one thought. I use this myself. I mean,
Mhm.
I wrote the book, but I go through it and I write down. So after each of the seven principles, so in chapter 5, it introduces the seven principles. And after each principle, what's the unexpected you can do to help you on the path to achieving your cool thing? So after each of the seven principles, so I'm writing these things. And Thibaut, it's amazing to me. I'm coming up with ideas that I hadn't thought of before for my business, for advancing the art movement, for selling the $1 million painting, for doing other things as well. It's like that. There's an old proverb. It's a Cameroon proverb. He who asketh the question cannot avoid the answer. So your mind searches for the answer to the question. So I wrote the questions. I wrote the chapters. But it's like when I ask myself the same questions, it's like, wow, there's new ideas that come. My wife and I, a couple of days ago, drove up a couple hours to see one of our daughters. It was her birthday with family and so forth. And I had my wife drive, and I'm going through my book and I'm answering the questions myself. So the questions are right. Good questions lead to good answers. So I appreciate your pointing that out.
Oh, absolutely. So how do we get our hands on this little gem?
It's real simple. There's only one place. It's Amazon.com. So
There you
Amazon,
go.
and it's we won't say the price because it's probably going to be increased dramatically in the future. But right now you can get it for a good price.
So
But
go get it now.
Amazon.com, put in your simple guide to doing the impossible, or Timothy S. Paulson, because there's other Timothy Paulsons. And I often just scratch my head over like the value of a book, not just mine, but it's like, what does an author do to write a book? She lives her entire life. She has all these experiences. She begins to write the book, and the book, it doesn't just happen overnight. There's a lot of work that goes into writing a book, years of experience, years of know-how, all this knowledge put into 102 pages, and you can buy it for $15. That's always boggled my mind. It's like when we talk about going to the master. So, my dad went to Claude Buck, and you went to Dan Kennedy, and people go to you. You're the master. It's like that's great. When you buy a book, that's going to the master for $15. So it's mind-boggling, the value of a book. And that's why I see all the books behind you. You understand the value of Think and Grow Rich, one of my favorites. Other books as well. Is like, go to the master. And this just happens to be something that makes it a little bit easier.
So make sure you go shopping today at Amazon before he raises the price to $1 million a book, just
I've been
like
known
his
to
painting.
do that. Yeah, I've been known.
And I'll put a link in all my posts, no matter where you're catching this podcast or video cast. So it's both. You can get the YouTube version, or run all the different podcasting platforms. You can get that at our website, dfymarketingsystems.com. And make sure you sign up for our free membership so you're informed of all these cool interviews that I do with industry leaders and awesome people like yourself, Dr. Timothy Paulson. Thank you so much, my friend. I know we've known each other, but I always learn something when we do these interviews and talk, when I spend time with you. And today was no exception. Thank you.
Thank you, Thibaut. You bring out the best in people in all that you do. So thank you. I appreciate the privilege.
Well, I try. Thanks. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the DFY Restaurant Revolution podcast. Join us in the revolution by subscribing, rating, and reviewing on your favorite podcasting platform today.